Mahatma Gandhi said, when you make yourself into zero, your power becomes invincible. Now, any politician or anybody in the life of trying to institute social change in a society would like to have their power be invincible. But it only happens when you aren't, but it is. And that's the one that is really hard, that you have to, in a way, die into not my but thy will for that kind of potential impact on social change.
I think there's a paradox there in a sense, because if we totally sort of bow to the will of God, it might lead us to not want to resist the current situation.
It's an incredibly interesting risk. And you've got to trust that when you have surrendered, you will hear so clearly. The Tao says the truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing. And your longing to have it different than it is ultimately a trap, because it keeps you from hearing the whole gestalt, the whole way things are. And as you hear the totality of it, you trust that out of that will come an appropriate action, a dharmic action. And that's the trust of Dharma. That's the trust in the wisdom of the universe that is greater than your own personal ego wisdom. So there is certainly an exquisite risk in it. Yeah. I mean, you know, we're so used to working out of I ought to do it, I should do it, getting behind ourselves and pushing. But the whole idea of trusting that if we didn't push, something would still happen is very interesting to explore in people.
Well, there must be a fine line between trusting and not pushing on the one hand, and on the other hand, being really passionate about social change.
But again, it's where passion comes from. If passion comes out of what I call milking the drama, or comes out of identifying with the emotions, I think it's short of what the possibility is. There is, for example, what's called dharmic anger, where a Zen monk will beat his student out of the incredible amount of love and compassion he has. I would say that if you're deeply enough in love with the universe, then the passion that arises out of it is different than if you aren't. And I think there's a passion that comes out of a joyful involvement in the universe. But I think it's the passion of a river or a tree. I don't think it has to be, you know, very, that kind of, although it could be.
Well, you seem to be suggesting that the quality of one's actions in a political or social arena, or any arena for that matter, is really determined by internal factors, and that would make it, would seem to me, impossible to judge the actions of anyone else, even a Stalin or a Hitler.
I think it's pretty tricky business. I think you can make judgments about actions, that you don't judge beings, you judge their actions. And actions are good or evil in the sense that actions increase paranoia and separateness, or they increase unity. So you can judge actions and you can be opposed. I can say, I don't agree with that action you're going to do, and in fact, I'm going to stop you from doing the action. But as Kabir said, do what you do with another human being, but never put them out of your heart. That if I have to harden my heart in order to oppose you, I lost. We both lost. And that's part of the art of the inner and the outer dialogue.
You know, George Orwell in 1984 refers to Big Brother as this sort of, one gets the sense that the game is that he's this loving tyrant, or at least his people believe that all of the cruelties are done out of some kind of a benevolence. And it seems to me that there's a longing that people have for perhaps a benevolent tyrant who will come in and straighten things out for us. Dostoevsky spoke about how people long to take their freedom and lay it at the feet of a benevolent church that might act in a tyrannical way.
Yeah, I think the deeper issue is whether the universe is benevolent or not. Because we all see that when you invest in an institution or another person, you are investing external to your own deepest inner truth. And you've constantly got to be running that back against your inner truth. You can't just join a club and then say, I surrender to the club. Like the whole misconception of a guru is that you surrender to a person. you only surrender to that which is the truth where God, Guru, and Self are one and the same thing. So when you surrender that way, you're surrendering that way at the same time. I could never imagine surrendering to something that would invalidate my intuitive wisdom. And as long as you keep connecting to that, but the question of whether or not, then you know, you don't have to judge whether it's benevolent or malevolent, you just judge, is this harmonious with my inner being? I don't have to judge you, I just have to keep my own game on a straight path. The question of whether the universe is benevolent or not, that's an interesting one. Because I have a sense, I was talking with Jerry Brown, who used to be a governor here in California, and we were talking about that issue of whether you have to assume a benevolent universe in order to trust deeply enough to surrender.
Yeah.
And we both could hear the lawfulness of the universe. And I would say that there is an evolutionary thrust that's not a Darwinian kind. It's much more of a consciousness evolution. Or, I mean, the kind of metaphor I play with is the one manifests as the many returning to the one, or something like that. So there's directionality, and in that sense, it has values connected with it. But I don't think you'd call that either benevolent or malevolent anymore. You wouldn't call a clock benevolent or malevolent because it's going forward instead of backwards.
Well, I know it's a deep philosophical issue. There's a strong trend amongst existentialists and amongst behaviorists and atheists and left-wing political people to suggest that the universe is fundamentally indifferent, and it's up to us to create our own reality. And I guess often people feel that it should be created from the intellect, from rationality.
Well, that's, I think, giving us really short shrift. Because to me, the intellect is a kind of a very small system within a much larger context, and to deny the context in which the intellect functions is to leave one little segment of nature trying to subsume everything under it. It's a lot like the drunk looking for the watch under the street lamp, you know, when he lost it up in the alley, but there's a light here, and it's this sort of, what it also does is it makes the whole world object. The intellect makes the world object, because it's all you always think about things. And that always puts you one thought away from where it is. So you're always an alien in your own universe when you mediate everything through your intellect. So the fun is to have your intellect, as Ramakrishna said, it's a wonderful servant, but it's a lousy master. And I think that's probably true.
You spoke a little earlier about making political decisions and judgments in terms of how it fits, I think, with one's heart.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that in...
Not heart, emotional heart. You know, heart like Chinese sin, or the Atma, meaning the deepest place of truth.
The core.
The deepest intuitive place in one's being, yeah.
That notion would seem to contradict what we see very much in the world about us now, which are religious political movements, you know, the moral majority or the Islamic fundamentalism, where in the name of a particular religious dogma, certain political planks are established, and everyone within that organization or within that tradition is expected to support a particular political attitude.
When there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty. When there's a lot of uncertainty, there is usually a lot of fear attendant to it. And how people react to fear is interesting. Some people just consume more. They say, I'll get it while I can because it's all going to blow up anyway. They become more and more materialistic. Some people they want to be on the right side when the doors close, so they become fundamentalists in one sense or another. They grab on to right as opposed to evil. They want to be one of the 144,000 that gets in the door. And the other group uses it, the uncertainty, as a way to deal with their inner relationship to uncertainty, and they go inward. And you can see the society dealing with the fear that way. And so that real thrust to the kind of righteousness is staying at the plane of good and evil. It's staying at the plane of polarities. And it's not seeing, as G. Manly Hall said, that he who knows not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light knows not me.